My wife and I just got back from a North Atlantic cruise that included stops in Iceland, Greenland, and Nova Scotia. Before we flew up to Reykjavik to pick up our ship, we stopped in New York City and we went to a place called Gulliver's Gate, and it's near Times Square. And it showed famous places from around the world in miniature. This is the Guggenheim Museum right here. And in the back, I don't know if you can see it very well, but it's a parade going down Fifth Avenue. We were really surprised to see this Marina Bay Sands resort right here, because we stayed there when we were in Singapore. And our grandson had recommended it because they had a pool up on the 57th floor, and it was the tallest, biggest above-ground pool in the world. And we also saw Mount Fuji and the Golden Pavilion, and we expect to be seeing those next year. Then we went to Junior's, which is one of Lynn's favorite places for cheesecake, and I like the Half Moon cookies and hot pastrami sandwiches. Lynn loves to go to the benches right here so she could look at all the goings on in Times Square. Then that night we flew out. The next morning we were in Reykjavik, Iceland, and the surprise about this town was so many of the buildings were white. On July 27th, I took a photo tour out of Reykjavik, and our first stop was at this lake. And the thing that caught me was there's not one single tree around this lake. And at our next stop, we saw this truck right here. It was a traveling hotel. This was one of Lynn's stops right here, and I stopped at a place like this, and these are sulfur springs, so too bad I can't give you the smell. I went on to see one of the few lighthouses left, and I was surprised about all the volcanic rock around it. And here's the shoreline right here, a lot of volcanic rock again. We stopped by this place right here. It looked like Old Faithful, except that this steam comes out of here all the time. It doesn't stop. And this is a geothermal plant that takes the steam coming from the ground. The steam runs the generators, which creates electricity. We went on to see the Blue Lagoon, which is probably the most attended tourist spot in Iceland. And we got back to the ship, and our friends Diane and Linda were waiting for us. The ship then went on to Ísafjörður, Iceland. I was really surprised about these mountains that came up out of the fjord. And here's our ship, the Insignia from Oceania, and some more of these strange looking mountains. And we didn't see very many icebergs. The ship's plan was to go through Prince Christian Fjord, where we would have seen lots and lots of icebergs. Unfortunately, they blocked the entrance, so we couldn't go through, so we had to go around. And this is the first port, Qaqortoq. Here I am, and this is Lynn and Laqueta and Bonnie, and we're standing in front of the museum there. I took a picture of this house just to show the effect that the weather has on the houses right there. And this is their local Lutheran church, and a little organ inside. And just outside, there's this nice little sculpture with dolphins up here on the top. The main industry in Qaqortoq is fishing. Here's a fishmonger, and it's amazing. He could strip the scales from that fish so quickly. That night back on ship, we celebrated Linda's birthday. Her room was full of balloons. Our next stop was Pamwit. We saw this most beautiful church. These toy bears were made out of sealskin. And then our next stop in Greenland was Nuuk, and we had coffee at this lady's house right here, not knowing that she was one of the most famous women in Greenland. And Lynn is showing off some sealskin pants right there. We couldn't bring them in the United States. And this right here is a caribou hot dog. They call it warm sled dog. And I really like this sculpture. And this is a nice picture of the ship. And you can see how rough the terrain is. This is cruise number 38. And this is the first time I had seen a female tender driver. Our next stop was Sydney, Nova Scotia. Here we are standing in front of St. Anne's Bay. And this bay is full of brackish water because at high tide the Atlantic Ocean comes in. We stopped by the Alexander Graham Bell Museum, where we saw inventions that were done in Canada only. So, for example, this is the first successful commercial telephone. He also invented an airplane, and it was the first flight in Canada, and it was done shortly after the Wright brothers flight. This right here is a hydrofoil that would skim across the water pretty fast. And here's Mr. Bell right here with his wife, who was very successful herself, even though she was deaf. Our next stop was Halifax, Nova Scotia, so here we are getting off the ship, and a bagpiper had greeted us. Laqueta had lost her watch aboard ship, and she was very happy that she found it because it's a Gucci. We went to Peggy's Cove and stopped at a restaurant there and had this hot gingerbread with cold ice cream. Boy, was that good. And these are some pictures I took. This is the lighthouse. Here's a beautiful picture. I just love this picture. And this picture really is of the cove, Peggy's Cove. Here's Linda. She's holding a female and a male lobster. And then that night we had dinner again, and Walter, who has been such a great server, was in the picture here with us. And next stop was in Boston, and this is the Boston Tea Party Museum right here, and this is the Old State House. And we were interested in two parks. One was Fenway Park for baseball, and then Durgan Park for mighty fine prime rib. Then we came to New York City, passed by the Statue of Liberty. Lynn took a picture of me in front of downtown Manhattan. Here the girls are outside the ship terminal. Our plan was to get discount tickets. As it turned out, only two of us went. Bonnie and I went to see Waitress, and it was a very funny musical. We really enjoyed it. And our last day in New York City, we went to Ellen's Stardust Diner. The diner has been open for about 15 years, and people like this who perform for us, 220 of them have made it to Broadway. And this is strange looking cheesecake that tasted very good. That's all, folks.